Teachers of Reddit, what is the most disturbing thing your student has ever done? Story 1. Few years back, I taught second grade. An 8-year-old boy would always bring little treats for me in the morning like candy, a cookie, or even these tiny animal toys. This one morning, he came to my desk and told me he had a gift for me. He opened his bag and pulled out a big brassiere and gave it to me. I was speechless, took it and put it in a drawer, and just said thank you. Called in his mom and told her about this. Kid never gave me gifts again. Story 2. My mother is a middle school teacher, so she's got some stories, but this one from this fall is quite scary. As a class, we're getting new assigned seats and waiting at the front of the classroom while the teacher reads out names and seats. A girl, who was pretty quiet but not exactly loner status, stabbed a boy in the back with a pair of scissors completely unprovoked. She jabbed him deep enough to puncture a lung, and somehow this kid didn't notice. It wasn't until 10 to 15 minutes later when he asked to use the restroom and another teacher saw the back of him soaked in blood. They figured out what happened and who did it. Police were called, and she was taken to a children's facility. My mother stopped in at the end of the day to chat with the principal about the incident, and what the principal described was quite disturbing. She apparently sat there the entire time the police were talking to her about what she did and why she did it, and she had absolutely no remorse. She sat there and nodded. No tears. Gave no reason why she did it. Was told she would be going into a children's facility. Nothing. No reaction. Just sat there staring. This wasn't revenge for something this boy did. They weren't friends, and my mom said he's the sweetest thing who enjoys his small group of friends and Pokemon. She did this completely randomly. Story 3. Middle school English teacher. I had a student pull a tooth out of his own head to get out of silent reading. It was a baby tooth, thank God, but according to Mom, it was not loose. He just sat at his desk and grabbed it and yanked it back and forth and popped it out and came up to the desk bleeding all over himself and said he wasn't able to read anymore, so could he just put his head down. He was sent to the nurse and Mom was horrified. Story 4. I had a girl who couldn't be in the classroom and had to be on a 1-1 with me at all times. But she couldn't be in the classroom because she was extremely violent and deliberately stabbed another child in the eye with a colored pencil, then laughed about it. The other child had to be hospitalized. When we asked her why she did it, she started laughing again and said, "Because I wanted to." She would also randomly attack kids on the playground and in the halls. When they put her on a 101 with me and she couldn't do that anymore, she started attacking me on a daily basis. She was 4. Answer. This is basically one of my main clients. I work in a group home for the mentally disabled handicapped. A lot of my clients are prone to outbursts of some kind, but I have this one client. Since he was old enough to stand by himself, he's been insanely violent, stabbing anyone that came close enough, running away, biting, hitting, kicking, spitting. You name it. Hell, throw his head back and just absolutely smash it into pulp if you don't intervene. But the thing is, he laughs the entire time. If you ask him why he just hurt someone, he'll laugh and tell you it's fun, or he doesn't know and just does it. He's insanely smart, but insanely manipulative. He'll invent intricate reasons to isolate staff or his family members just so he can attack them. I can't even tell you how many scars I have from him alone. His family refuses to acknowledge that something is seriously wrong and that he's actually genuinely hurting people in severe ways. So our hands are tied, and there isn't really anything we as staff can do about it. After working with him for several years, it's clear as day that he never actually feels joy or happiness unless he's hurting something. Everything he does is manipulation or allure for an attack. Story 5. I teach 4-year-olds part-time, which means I usually do art and recreation in the afternoons. There's this girl in my class, let's call her Mary, who is a tiny terror that frequently runs around making other kids cry. Her moves are very calculated, a hair pull, kicking a toy over, snatching art. She waits until the other child is crying before she relents. She never wants the toy, just the reaction. On the other hand, this boy, Jim, is her polar opposite, and often the voice of reason in my class. He's a gentle giant, the biggest kid in preschool. He shares happily, is kind during playtime, and is probably the most thoughtful human I've ever met. Well, one day during outside time, Mary kept targeting Jim. He was pretty good-natured the whole time. She would snatch a shovel from him, and he would respond kindly by saying, "It's okay, you can have it. Toys are for sharing stuff like that." Sidebar. Remember those giant red and yellow cars that kids sit in and pedal with their feet? The yard has 5 for the kids to share. Mary was leaning against a wall and Jim pushing one of those cars. The kids like running around with them, so that was normal. Jim was probably a good 30 feet away from her. When he suddenly started accelerating, he was aimed like a homing missile, pointing straight at poor clueless Mary. Genuinely believed he would turn away at the last minute or stop. I was wrong. He slammed the car right into Mary, effectively crunching her against the wall. I'll never forget how long it took for her to inhale. I was shaking. I thought he cracked her ribs. Her entire back was bruised, but thankfully no further damage. I was too shocked to be angry. After passing Mary to my co-teacher, I turned to Jim, who was sulking in the corner, and asked, "Why did you do that?" He just shrugged and very calmly said I was just trying to take care of our problem. 100 scared of this kid now. Edit. Mary is still in jerk. She just avoids Jim now. He's the silent guardian of the preschool, apparently. Also, seriously, thanks for loot. I've never gotten this much karma before. I'm giving Jim extra goldfish, his favorite snack, tomorrow on behalf of Reddit. Story 6. A kid tried to hold the classroom hostage by pulling a box cutter. Immediately started making crazy demands. Before security could even arrive, a big kid pushed him down, grabbed the box cutter right out of his hands and said, "Quit being a jerk," then sat right back down for the lesson to continue. Edit. Thank you so much for the gold, kind stranger. If I knew where the big kid went on to after middle school, I'd share it with him. Story 7. Recently had one of my students tell a pregnant teacher that he wanted to punch her in the stomach. Another student said, "You can't do that. She's pregnant." The first student then said, "That's the point." These are 5th graders. This is also in a school that rarely has behavior problems, so this was quite a shock. Answer. Something similar happened to me when I was pregnant with my first. A student told me he was going to make me lose the baby. It's the only time I've really ever flipped out on a student in my 7 years of teaching. That student had some serious issues, though, and by the end of the school year, I was the only teacher he would talk to about the shoot that went on his life, bouncing from foster home to foster home, abuse, etc. He left a letter on my desk at the end of the year saying that my unborn child was incredibly lucky to have me as a mom. I ugly cried at my desk when I read it. X200B, edit. Also, this wasn't even close to the worst thing a student has ever done in class. It was just the most emotional I got because I was pregnant and hormonal. My reply to this question is here if you're curious. Story 8. I caught some kid trying to take inappropriate photos of his lady friends in the class. When I noticed him doing something fishy, he was directly aiming the camera to where the female students were sitting. I told him to hand over the phone and he got visibly uncomfortable, but complied. I handed it over to his form tutor, who was a lady, and explained the situation. I figured if there were any photos of female students, It wouldn't be okay for me to see it. First sweep through his documents didn't reveal anything, but luckily I thought of suggesting her to check the hidden category, and I'm told everything was in there. School took disciplinary action as a result. Story 9. I was a supervisor for a special program that involved about 20 students that were expelled from other schools. Most of them were known gang members. The program had a strict no bandana policy. One day, Kid 1, M16, stole Kid 2's M17 cigarettes while Kid 2 was in an office session about his homework. We found out later that Kid 1 thought it was hilarious and was laughing about it. Kid 2 goes for his smokes during break and can't find them. He proceeds to flip out and start screaming about how he's going to fudge someone up. No one admitted it. We de-escalated the situation and later took him to the store to buy a new pack for him. A few days go by and Kid 1 gets ratted out by another student who was in the same gang as Kid 2. We didn't know any of this was going on at the time. One afternoon during a group session, we would have them sit in a circle during some lessons instead of at desks. Out of nowhere, these two boys jump up and yell, "Yo, Kid 1," as they literally run at him and proceed to beat him up right in front of everyone until the staff broke it up. All three got expelled after that, and I have no idea what happened to them, although I can imagine some scenarios based on how committed they were to gang life. Edit. Us buying cigarettes for a minor is certainly a point of controversy, as evidenced in the comments. A few people correctly pointed out that, given the circumstances, it was the best decision at the time. It helped us calm him down, take him away from the tense environment, and offered us an opportunity to create a moment of trust, building in adult figures, which we know he didn't have much of. The majority of those kids were daily smokers, plant substance and tobacco, so this was not a moment to try and be authoritative about smoking. Cigarettes were a coping mechanism more than anything. These kids had really shoot lives overall. Cigarettes are a kind of stress relief for them. No one joins a gang because they grew up in a privileged environment. Answer. Im sat here thinking how strange and yet how helpful it is for teachers to take a kid to the store to buy cigarettes. They shouldn't be smoking, nobody should. But by taking them to get cigs after theirs were stolen, you stopped them getting stressed from nicotine withdrawal. You also guaranteed they came back to class after a very quick trip to the store. If they'd stormed out, they probably wouldn't have come back to class that day and might have been penalized for an unauthorized absence. I'm guessing that staff in a special program for teens with gang affiliations know which battles to pick. Story 10. I used to teach at an alternative high school, so a lot of my students were kids on probation, kids from areas with a lot of gang violence. Many of them had issues related to the fact that they were born substances addicted, that kind of thing. I had a student who I had worked hard with to build a good rapport. One Friday, he looked me in the eyes and told me, completely calmly, that I shouldn't come to work on Monday. He kept telling me that he didn't want me to be there Monday. When I finally pressed him for why I should not come to work Monday, he told me that he was going to blow this shoot up. I said, "You know I need to report this, right?" He told me to do what I had to do. He was arrested right out of my classroom and I had to be interviewed by the police. It was honestly really traumatic. I ended up calling out Monday, even though I knew nothing was going to happen because my anxiety went through the roof. I called out a lot after that and found a new job shortly after. But I still have a great deal of compassion for that student. I think about him often. I hope he's okay. Story 11. Back when I was a teacher, one of my students randomly started punching another kid, his friend, in the middle of class. No provocation whatsoever. The puncher was into bodybuilding and pretty in shape, and he had never been violent before in school, so this was both surprising and hard to break up, considering his size. He broke his friend's nose and was smiling after, had no idea what he did was weird or upsetting. Answer: I had a friend who would randomly get violent and wouldn't stop until someone else hit him back. I was in fights with him often and was basically his only friend because nobody else tolerated his behavior. He was a really nice guy when he wasn't acting up, and we hung out a lot. One time he got me by surprise, though, and chalked me against a wall, and I genuinely thought I might die until another friend and some adults could pull him off of me. I was afraid of him and wary for a while after that, but it was also the last time he got violent like that. We were friends for years after, until he randomly blocked my number and social media out of the blue. Story 12. I had a 5th grader who I swore was sociopathic. His father had deported the boy's mother because he wanted a new wife, if that gives some context to the living situation. The boy would say very aggressive intimacy things, moon students on the bus, etc., but the predatory behavior was the worst. He'd wait as students left the room so he could be next to last, turn off the light, and backhand the last kid in line, often his own cousin, who was his most common victim. I had to keep an eye on him constantly. He'd also steal electronics and things from his friends or force his cousin to do so in case. They were caught. P.S. Yes, CPS was involved. This was almost a decade ago, so I'm not sure what happened to him. Story 13. Sensitive material. Sorry if this upsets anyone. I am a special education teacher, and during my student teaching, I had a lovely 16-year-old girl with Down syndrome. She was a quiet, reserved girl who often was not well groomed. This is something that we worked on with her at school. She was gaining weight and tired a lot, and was discovered that she had not had a period for several months. The school nurse examined her and realized she was nearly 6 months pregnant. After an investigation, her younger brother, 11 years old, was having intimacy with her and got her pregnant. I believe he went to a juvenile center. I moved out of the country, so I'm not sure whatever happened to her. I do know she gave birth and the baby was adopted. I always think about that girl often. Story 14. I taught college. I taught mostly seniors and grad students. I had to essentially sit with a disturbed student in my office and keep him talking as campus police searched his office and workstation. The kid made threats against other students, and the students waited to tell me until it got really bad. When I intervened, he started threatening me, like on my personal cell phone, personal email, stuff like that. My husband told me to tell campus police, which I did, but everyone told me there was nothing really they could do. The chair of my dept couldn't even kick him out of my class because he was enrolled through a different department. His home department was slow to do anything. I called a meeting with him to ostensibly talk things out, but I had told my TA to search his stuff. My TA immediately called campus police, who went with him to search those areas. They found some stuff in his office, enough to kick him out of school, but nothing that rose to criminality. Well, that is, until he brandished the gun that was in his backpack. This happened as he stepped out of my office, and my TA and campus police stood there. I watched a campus cop literally tackle him off his feet. Edit. Whoa, this blew up. I've gotten a lot of questions about the details, and I'm reticent on giving much more. But trust me when I say I had the support of my dept and staff. It's just that there wasn't much we could do. Why not call the real cops? It depends on how your university police force is set up. At ours, city police don't have jurisdiction over the campus. We have a bona fide police force, graduated from the academy and all, who operate to enforce the law as well as university rules, supported by an OAK force. If, as a student, you interacted with campus police, That's probably who you talked to. However, when it comes to serious criminal acts, they usually call in the city police because it's a small department. The issue is that if they called city police every time someone sent threatening messages, the cops would never leave. It's hard to tell in the moment what's just someone venting in a very unhealthy way and when it's a serious threat. I've had a student corner me in my office, crying and screaming, which was much more disturbing at the time, but turned out to be harmless. This guy didn't raise his voice once. He was angry, but mostly seemed befuddled by the whole thing. Why was I even involving myself in a dispute among students kind of attitude? The threats were taken out of context, and he apologized if they scared me. In the moment, it felt more like I was dealing with an arrogant prick who was going to sick his parents on me than someone truly disturbed. It wasn't until the very end that I realized the danger I had placed myself in. What they found, I really don't want to go into the details, but it was related to breaking the rules of appropriate use of a campus workstation. To those saying you can't search that without cause, actually, no, it's university property they allow you to use. Much like your high school locker or work desk, they can search it at any time. Story 15. I was a preschool teacher at the time. I was doing group time, singing songs, reading a book, and all the kids were sitting on the floor. One left to blow her nose. She came back, walked through the crowd of kids to get back to her spot, grabbed a quiet girl's hair, and kept walking. My assistant thought it was a mistake, but the girl kept walking. She even bent at the knees and yanked while the poor, long-haired girl screamed. That girl had no remorse and would be so unpredictable. She would look in your eyes, but right through them. It was a stressful year. Story 16. One of my students, high school, came in one day and handed me a pop vinyl figurine from one of her favorite bands. She said I could have it, and I, not used to random gifts, asked her why she was giving it to me. She said something along the lines of she didn't need it anymore. I thanked her and told her to have a good day. The following day, she eliminated herself. It immediately became clear why she didn't need the figurine anymore. That still bothers me. Edit. Thank you for the gold and platinum. Unnecessary but appreciated. Also, thanks to everyone for the kind words. In retrospect, I knew. This act was a sign that she was contemplating, preparing for tragic end. But it didn't occur to me at that moment, and that haunts me. I hope she found peace. Answer. I'm terribly sorry this happened to you. For anyone who reads this comment gets to this part of the thread. This is a really common sign that someone is going to commit tragic end when they start giving away things that might not have a lot of meaning to you, but seem to them. It's a really subtle cry for help. Edit. Lots of people seem to have different ideas of what cry for help means, and it's okay that you have different ideas and everything, but I don't see why it's such a big deal that my definition disagrees with yours. Story 17. I'm a teacher at a language course. One student in particular is very challenging. He took his pants off twice, once in my co-worker class, once in my class. Both happened right after we yelled at him for being disruptive. Then it escalated. I was writing something on the board and the boys were giggling and laughing. I thought they were being silly as usual, but when I turned to face them, one of the boys told me that the challenging boy flashed them his male body part. 2 weeks later, he was running to the classroom, stopped in front of my manager and headbutted her breast. On the same day, he also planted his face on our janitor's boobs when she was trying to break up their fight. We have told his mom about this, and she said she would talk to him about the flashing incident, but not the headbutting, as she was sure he did not mean to do it. Story 18. At the first school that I taught at, I had a girl come up to me one day and say, "Robert has a knife." I pulled Robert into the hallway to talk with him about it. He said that he didn't have a knife, but did have a box cutter. I asked him why he had it, and he said, "Because I'm tired of Chris. Chris was an annoying suck-up, but wasn't really bad or mean to other kids." I asked Robert what he was planning on doing to Chris. He said, "I am going to get him in the bathroom." I usually took the class to the restroom after lunch, but I didn't that day because they were being rowdy in the hallway. I took Robert to the office, and after hearing the story, the principal chewed him out. She then called Robert's mom, and she chewed him out on the phone. Here's the kicker. Robert knew that he was in serious trouble. He knew that what he was planning was wrong. He just didn't care. Not in a false bravado macho type was. He literally didn't care. I dislike to predict a kid's future criminal endeavors, but that kid scares me. By the way, Robert was 8 years old at the time. Story 19. I used to teach a PE class to 3 5-year-olds. I had this one kid who used to come with his friend from kinder. His friend's mother apologized to me numerous times and said she never would have offered to bring him if she knew what he was like. More than once I had to evacuate the rest of the kids from the gym because this 3-year-old would be running around the gym screaming "Fook" and "Coont" at the top of his lungs while trying to punch, kick, or headbutt other kids. You never knew what would set him off. If you asked him to kick a ball, he was equally likely to kick another student or the ball. One time, he went so violent that I couldn't get him away from the other kids and ended up wrapping him up in the firm cuddle technique, which they definitely don't teach teachers about anymore. I basically dropped him to his knees with me, on my knees behind him, arms wrapped around his arms and his chest. The only part he could move was his head, and he kept trying to smash the back of his head into my face. But the worst part was the laughter. He normally had a vague, empty look on his face, but when he was trying to hurt someone, he would scream with laughter, wearing the biggest shoot. Eating grin. I only had him for 10 sessions once a week, but holy fudge, I will never forget that kid. Answer. Holy crap. Not a teacher, but a speech therapist. I had a kid with oppositional defiance disorder, language impairment, reactive attachment disorder, and he honestly scared the crap out of me as much as I tried to love him. We tried to include him in social activities, but he would do completely unpredictable things like push someone off the top of the ropes course, bite his finger, and smear blood on his classmates, etc. He once gave the psychiatrist a concussion by headbutting her while she was trying to cuddle roll him into his weighted blanket, and has punched through windows and drywall before. So many tears shed trying to get through to the little man. I'm so fearful for the type of teen or adult he will become.